So this morning, this sermon, A Dream, is by Ursula and myself. Ursula is missing in action. It's sad actually because she came over Friday night to run through this with me, and this morning on the way here had a car accident. So we ask you to hold her in our prayers this morning. But thank you to Sandra, who is stepping in for us. So you will have heard this speech maybe before, but we pray that you will listen with new ears. So it's 1963. 250,000 people are gathered on Washington Mall. Picture it. 250,000 people in 1963. We're not talking about the Women's March, just a couple of years ago. We're talking about 1963. Charlton Heston, Sidney Poitier, Sammy Davis Jr., Burt Lancaster, and other celebrities joining with those who had no fame and those who were seen as troublemakers. And then the crowd fell quiet. What to expect?
I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land.
You know, the Spirit of the Lord is on me, says Luke. Luke 4:18. Because God has anointed us to preach good news to the poor. God has sent us to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and to release the oppressed.
So we come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This one note was the promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable right of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vault of opportunity of this nation. And so we come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
Proverbs tells us, when justice is done, it brings joy to the righteous, but terror to the evildoers. Whoever pursues righteousness and love finds life, prosperity, and honor.
We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the summit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. And those who hoped that the Negro needed to blow off steam and now will be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his right to citizenship. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges.
Deuteronomy tells us to follow justice and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land the Lord your God is giving you.
But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the worn threshold which leads to the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deed. Let us not speak to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high planes of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by the presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead and we cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We cannot be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating "for whites only." We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote, and the Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, 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 we are not satisfied. We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
This is 1963. We're now in 2019. How much of this is still so true? If I have denied justice to any of my servants, says Job, whether male or female, when they have a grievance against me, what will I do when God confronts me? What will I answer when called to account?
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. Some have been the veterans of creative suffering, continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair.
We can go back to our homes, our communities, and our neighborhoods. Because God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. For the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe.
I say to you today, my friends, Even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in an American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but rather by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
We have a dream still today.
I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with this vicious racist, with this governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
And we still have a dream today.
I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be plain and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith we will be able to hew out the mountains of despair a stone of hope. With this faith we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. And this will be the day. This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my father died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
Now the Lord is the Spirit. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is the freedom.
So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the high-ring Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from the Lookout Mountains of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and every molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom to ring, we will let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city. We will be able to speed up that day when all God's children, black men, white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the word of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
You know, Martin Luther King had that dream in 1963. And we have that dream today in 2019. No person should be held hostage by hate, by fear, by ignorance, because we're all created in the image of God. So our challenge this morning is, will you continue the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. by dreaming, by reimagining, by challenging, and by loving? Amen.
It's that time in our sermon where we are sermon. These as a pastor, I have to follow them. I have to now get up and ask for money. Okay, here we go. Here comes that time of service where we collect money, not only to support the church and pay the bills, but also to support organizations that we support as charities to help stop injustice in our world. This church was started by people that wanted a place where they could come to feel safe, and everybody here is welcome. But as the ushers come forward, we ask that you stand and sing From the Highest Heights, and give as you're able and as you're led to.
Apart to the depths of the sea, creation's revealing your majesty. Give it to the from the colors of fall to the fragrance of spring. Every creature unique in the song that it sings, all exclaiming, indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. Powerful, untamable, awestruck, we fall to our knees and we humbly proclaim that you are amazing, God. Who has told every lightning bolt where it should go? Or seen heavenly storehouses laden with snow? Who imagined the sun and give source to its flight, yet conceals it to bring us the coolness of night? None can fathom, indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. All powerful, untamable, awestruck, we fall to our knees and we humbly proclaim that you are amazing, God. Indescribable, uncontainable, you place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing.